I never imagined that at 62 years old, I'd find myself gripping the steering wheel at nearly midnight, driving through unfamiliar streets, my fingers trembling, and my pulse hammering so hard it felt like my chest might split open. It began roughly 3 hours earlier, when I drove past the towering building where Martin Hale had worked faithfully for over 25 years. The entire structure was dark, parking lot empty, lights off, and a paper sign taped to the glass doors read, "Closed for renovations beginning 6 p.m. At first, I thought I'd mistaken the address. But no, there it was, the company's sleek silver logo gleaming faintly against the dark facade, mocking me. My hands shook as I called his number. "How's the project coming along, my love?" I asked, forcing a calmness that didn't exist. His reply came quickly, polished, rehearsed, too perfect to be real. "Swamped here, Clara. The Singapore deal's keeping us busy. Don't wait up for me." Then I heard it, faint at first, but unmistakable. Soft moans, a woman's laughter, the kind of sounds I knew too well, only not from him anymore. My stomach twisted, but something deeper woke up inside me. Something sharp, alert, painfully clear. I opened the family GPS app, the one I'd insisted we install after Martin's minor car accident last year. His car, a silver Mercedes S-Class, glowed as a blue dot, parked in a wealthy neighborhood nearly 40 minutes away, in a part of Charlotte we had never once visited together. Each mile I drove felt like shedding my own skin, layer by layer, until all that was left was something raw, trembling, and exposed. The neighborhood was almost unreal in its beauty. Manicured lawns, old-fashioned lampposts casting a soft amber glow, perfect little homes breathing contentment. His Mercedes sat before a navy blue 2-story house with hydrangeas framing the porch and a wooden swing that swayed gently in the breeze. A light glowed on the second floor, silhouettes shifting behind lace curtains straight from a magazine spread. I parked 3 houses down, my breath shallow. Nothing made sense. This wasn't a co-worker's home, nor a rented apartment for secret meetings. It was a home, lived in, loved in. A painted mailbox read, "The Harpers," with sunflowers curling around the name, and a welcome mat smiled up at the doorstep. Then I saw her. A woman, not young, but not old either, maybe in her mid-40s, standing by the upstairs window. Her hair was tied in a messy bun, and she wore a pale blue silk robe. My throat tightened instantly. I knew that robe. Martin had given me the same one for our anniversary, only mine was burgundy. She glanced down the street, her expression calm, content. The kind of peace that stung more than any betrayal could. My phone buzzed. A message from him. "Leaving the office now, love. Don't wait up." The sheer audacity almost made me laugh. Almost. I checked the dashboard clock, 11:43 p.m. How many nights had I done this? Eaten alone, slept alone, waited alone, while he lived this other life? Then I saw a boy, maybe 10 years old, appear beside her. His dark, wavy hair caught the light in the same way Martin's did, even the same tilt of the head when curious. The woman wrapped her arm around him, and together they disappeared into the soft-lit room. That's when the words, "my husband," lost all meaning. They became hollow, foreign sounds in my mind. 40 years of marriage, 2 grown children, 3 grandchildren, all built on what? Lies. Perfectly performed lies. Pain came next, deep, physical, as if grief had grown claws inside my chest. I must have passed out because I woke in the driver's seat at dawn. My neck ached, my eyes swollen. The blue house stood exactly as before, innocent under the pale morning light. But the Mercedes was gone. I drove home on autopilot, every streetlight and corner so familiar they no longer needed thought. After all, I'd been making this same drive for decades. I pulled into the driveway just as Martin was stepping through the front door, briefcase in one hand, a bakery box in the other. My favorite donuts. "Morning, sweetheart," he greeted, pressing a kiss against my cheek with that easy, practiced warmth I once thought was love. Got your favorites, Boston creams. I shouldn't have stayed at work all night, but you know how these overseas clients can be. His act was flawless. If I hadn't witnessed what I had, if I didn't already know the truth, I might have believed him. I found myself wondering how long he'd been rehearsing this theater. How many mornings he'd returned home with deceit hidden beneath powdered sugar and coffee. How thoughtful, I heard myself reply, startled by how steady my voice sounded. Go ahead and take a shower while I make the coffee. He nodded, whistling that same little tune he always did when he was content, the same tune I'd heard for 40 years, never realizing it meant he'd spent the night in someone else's arms. When the sound of running water filled the house, I opened his briefcase. Years of marriage had made me the model of discretion, or so I believed. Inside were the expected files, a tablet, branded pens, and something new. Hidden in a side compartment I'd never noticed before lay a second phone. My stomach tightened. The screen glowed with missed calls labeled home and a text that read, Daddy, don't forget my soccer game Saturday. Mommy says you promised. Love you, Jalen. Mommy, another woman, another son. Suddenly, the entire illusion of our life widened like a lens snapping into focus. Those constant business trips of 3 or 4 days, the urgent weekend work, the private phone calls in the yard, the unexplained expenses. I had been so trusting, but not stupid. No, I corrected myself. I had been a wife who believed. I had chosen trust because the alternative was too painful to imagine. Memory returned in painful flashes. That time 15 years ago when I found a jeweler's receipt in his jacket pocket. It's for my boss's assistant's birthday, he'd said with that calm confidence that disarmed me, and I'd accepted it. Or 10 years back, when our daughter Mara mentioned seeing her father at the upscale mall with a woman and a small boy. Probably a coworker's sister, I'd said. You know how your dad is, always helping people. Mara had been 15 then. The boy I saw last night looked around 10. The math was merciless. The water stopped. I slipped everything neatly back where it belonged. I'd learned more about lies in one night than in 40 years of marriage. He emerged, hair damp, smelling faintly of the cologne I'd been buying him every Christmas. I had the coffee ready, the donuts plated. Sleep well? He asked, taking a bite while scrolling through his tablet. As well as ever, I lied, and found that the lie came easily now. And you? Get any rest at the office? Couple hours on the sofa, he replied casually. Daniel was snoring next door. Daniel. The same colleague he'd toasted at his retirement dinner 6 months ago. I could still remember the speech. Martin praising loyalty and hard work. The memory turned my stomach. You okay? He asked, touching my forehead. You look pale. I smiled. Just tired. For 3 days I played my part. Smiling when I should, nodding at the right moments, even sleeping beside him. I perfected the act, responding to his lies with believable affection. He noticed nothing. After all, I had been predictable for 4 decades. Clara, the devoted wife. Clara, the perfect mother. Clara, the fool. But that version of me was gone. 3 days later, I put on jeans, a hoodie, large sunglasses, my hair tucked under a cap. Clothes I never wore. The woman I'd been died in that car 3 nights ago. At 2 p.m., I returned to the blue house, the one from the GPS. I had confirmed that Martin was truly at his office this time, even called his extension to be sure. The neighborhood was quiet, just the distant hum of a lawnmower and a barking dog. I parked closer this time. I needed to see for myself. At 2:30 she appeared, Candace, carrying a baby strapped to her chest. My breath caught. The child couldn't have been more than 6 months old, so it wasn't just the boy. Martin had built an entire new life, one child after another, while I clung to the ghost of our old one. I followed her on foot at a safe distance. She entered a quaint little cafe with hanging plants and soft jazz music spilling from the door. I sat outside, pretending to scroll my phone. She joined two women, also young mothers. Their voices drifted across the patio. Laughter, small talk, exhaustion. Then one of them said something that froze my heart. "Candace, you're so lucky. Marcus is such a hands-on dad. Most husbands aren't like that." Marcus. My Martin was Marcus here. Candace smiled, adjusting the baby. "He tries, even with all his business trips. He's gone 3 or 4 days sometimes, but he always makes it up to us. He's wonderful." Those same business trips, the same days he'd return to me, to our family. We were shifts on a schedule of deceit. I imagined his life mapped out like a spreadsheet. Names, dates, lies neatly categorized. "And how's Jalen handling the baby?" another woman asked. "Jealous at first," Candace said with a small laugh. "But Marcus bought him a new glove and now they play baseball every Saturday." Saturday afternoons, the work seminars he never missed. I stood to leave, but Candace's phone screen caught my eye. A beach photo. Martin, tan and smiling, a little boy perched on his shoulders while Candace, pregnant, laughed beside him. Turks and Caicos. The same week he was supposedly at a corporate retreat. I stumbled out of the cafe, numb, the sound of my pulse roaring in my ears. Then I heard him. "That's it, champ. Kick harder." Across the street in a small park, Martin, my husband, stood in the grass, coaching a youth soccer team. Jalen ran toward him, laughing, radiant. I watched for 20 minutes, silent, invisible. He looked alive, vibrant, warm, real. The father he once was with our children, but somehow more present, more joyful. It wasn't an act. He wasn't pretending. And that was the cruelest part. Who was he, truly? The man who kissed me each morning? Or the one who spent afternoons here, cheering for another child? The husband who whispered he loved me? Or the father who belonged entirely to another family? Did the real Martin ever exist? Or had he been a performance all along? My phone rang. It was him. "Hey, darling. The meeting wrapped up sooner than I expected. Want me to grab something for dinner?" I looked across the park where he still stood, barking encouragements to the young players on the field. "That would be perfect," I said softly. "Pick up a bottle of that Bordeaux we both love." "I know the one," he replied, smiling through the phone. "I love you, Celeste." "I love you too," I answered, though the words felt dry, like paper in my mouth. That night, while Jonathan slept peacefully beside me, his breathing even and guiltless, I slipped quietly out of bed and went to the bathroom. Under the cold light of the mirror, I studied the woman staring back. Every wrinkle, every faded trace of youth, told the story of a life given. 61 years old, 38 of them spent loving a man who had mastered the art of deception like a seasoned illusionist. The tears came quietly at first, then grew into broken sobs I smothered with a towel so I wouldn't wake him. I wasn't crying only for betrayal. I was mourning the stranger I had become. Who was I without him? Who had Celeste been before she became Mrs. Jonathan Reed? The memories came like fragments from another lifetime. The young woman who painted late into the night, who won a scholarship to Florence, who gave it up when Jonathan convinced her that family mattered more. "The art will always be there," he'd said, wearing that disarming smile that made me believe him. But children, they can't wait. And I had believed him. I boxed away my brushes, traded canvases for cribs, galleries for PTA meetings. I never regretted my children. Maya and Ruben were the brightest pieces of my world. But what happened to Celeste, the artist? She had slowly dissolved, replaced by Celeste, the wife. The next morning, While Jonathan went to his office, or perhaps to his alternate reality, I climbed up to the attic. There, buried beneath years of dust, I found my old art box. The brushes were stiff, the paints cracked, but the sketches, they were still alive, silent witnesses to a life I had once imagined. I also uncovered old letters, photographs, mementos of promises made and broken. Our wedding day, his teary smile when Maya was born, the shaky footage of Ruben's first steps. Moments that had felt so real. When, I wondered, had the lie begun? The phone rang. "Mama, are you okay?" It was Maya. Her voice carried that familiar concern. "I'm fine, love. Just tired." "Are you sure? I can come by. The kids have been asking for Grandma." The kids. My grandchildren. Jonathan's official grandchildren. I wondered if they knew they had another uncle and a baby aunt in that pretty blue house. Siblings they would never meet. The web of lies stretched outward, touching even the innocent. "Sunday is better," I lied. "Your dad will be home." But Sunday afternoons were never for us. They were for the other family. Later, I opened the old bank statements I'd ignored for years. Now, everything made sense. Regular transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, purchases from stores we'd never visited, medical bills that didn't match any of ours. Jonathan had been financing 2 homes, 2 entire lives. And I, the loyal wife, had been too trusting, too content to see the cracks. Invoices for private school tuition, violin lessons for a boy named Aiden, hospital records for a baby born at the same hospital as our children. The irony was cruel. That afternoon, for the first time in my life, I hired a private investigator, a quiet man named Victor Hale, recommended by a friend who'd survived a brutal divorce. "I need to know everything," I told him. "How long, how it started, everything." He looked at me with tired eyes that had seen too many hearts broken by truth. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes," I whispered, "even if it destroys me." Jonathan came home that night with lilies, my favorite, or rather, the favorites of the woman he thought I still was. I no longer knew what truly pleased me. What parts of my taste, my personality, were mine, and which belonged to his design. A week later, while Jonathan was away on one of his business trips, Victor returned. He laid a folder on the dining table, the same table that had seen 40 birthdays, 40 Christmases, and a lifetime of pretense. "Mrs. Reed," he began gently, "what's inside this folder won't be easy to see. Are you certain you want to go through it?" I nodded. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first page was a marriage certificate. Michael Stone had married Rachel Stone, 12 years ago. Not an affair, not a fling, a marriage. "But that's illegal," I gasped. "Technically, yes," Victor said. He used forged identification. Jonathan Reed and Michael Stone are the same man. But legally, they're 2 different people. It's a professional-level fabrication. The following pages felt like knives. Photos of their wedding, a beach ceremony, her in a white linen dress, him with that same deceitful smile. Birth certificates, Aiden Stone, 11 years old. Born just months after Jonathan's conference in San Diego. And baby Ava, 7 months old, conceived during a so-called leadership retreat. Then came property records, a beach house, a condo in Miami, a cabin in the Smoky Mountains, all cash purchases, all paid for with my mother's inheritance. The money meant for our future had built his other one. "How could anyone live this way?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Victor sighed. "I've seen liars, Mrs. Reed, but this is artistry and deceit. He runs 2 businesses, one for each identity. It funds his double life seamlessly." I turned the pages. School awards, report cards, even fertility treatments for Rachel. They too had struggled to have children, just like us. The symmetry was cruel. "There's one last thing," Victor said, hesitating. "The other woman, Rachel. She doesn't know about you. In her world, her husband's first wife, Celeste Reed, died 15 years ago. My heart froze. I was dead. In his other story, Jonathan had killed me, erased me, rewritten me as a ghost so he could live unburdened. Why? I asked faintly. Why go this far? Victor exhaled, sliding one last page forward. He met her during his knee therapy years ago. That was when it began. While you were caring for your sick mother, he was starting over. And in that moment, I realized the truth. While I held my dying mother's hand, Jonathan was already building the life where I didn't exist. Candace became pregnant soon after. Sterling flipped through the documents, then said quietly, "From the timeline, it looks like your husband chose to keep both lives instead of choosing one. Maybe it was the children, maybe the money, or maybe simply because he could." Nearly $3 million, the forensic reports showed, almost $3,000 spread across accounts tied to his two identities. $3 million. Money that had come from my inheritance, from years of saving, perhaps even from funds I believed were safe for our future, funneled into the scaffolding of his lies. I bolted to the bathroom and emptied my stomach until there was nothing left but bile. Sterling waited on the other side of the door with the calm of a professional who'd seen this collapse before. When I returned, he asked, gentle but direct, "What do you want to do with this?" "I need time," I whispered. "Can you dig deeper? Every account, every investment, everything." "Of course." "Do you think divorce?" he asked. "I'm thinking about justice," I replied, surprised at how cold and clear my voice sounded. For 3 days, I checked into a downtown hotel, telling Elijah I was visiting my sister in Chicago. I spread Sterling's files across the bed like evidence laid out on an operating table and made a decision that would change everything. I refused to be a silent victim, to let him keep a neat double life while I disappeared politely. I wouldn't lash out in a blaze of fury. I would dismantle him with surgical precision. First, allies. I called Jamal, my son, a corporate lawyer. "I need your help. Something delicate. Meet me at the Marriott, room 512. He arrived in an hour, face drawn. I showed him everything. Watching the blood drain from his features into cold rage was a relief I did not expect. "I'll ruin him," he said finally, voice low and lethal. "Bigamy, fraud, tax evasion, forged documents, he's exposed. I don't want him jailed," I told him. "I want him to lose everything he values and live to watch it happen." He stared at me, respect and fear mingling in his eyes. "What's the plan?" What followed was meticulous and ruthless. Jamal tightened the legal edges. "We'd need Amara. She runs PR for a major firm and could control the narrative when the story broke." Amara's grief turned into strategy. She wept, raged, and then organized. "When this comes out," she said, voice steady, "Dad must be the villain in every headline." I reached out to an unexpected ally, Elijah's sister, Patricia, who had always been quietly sympathetic. When I told her everything, she sighed. "I always suspected something," she admitted. "The trips, the sloppy stories. I thought an affair, never this." I asked for access to my mother's safe deposit box. Elijah used it for important papers. After a pause, she said, "Mom loved you. You'll get whatever you need." Over the next weeks, the plan took shape. I hired a second investigator focused on financial fraud. He uncovered tax evasion, income hidden across fake entities, cash purchases of property. A forensic accountant traced money flows that would make the IRS sit up. Jamal prepared motions to freeze assets at a moment's notice. Amara primed media contacts for a coordinated release, the expose of the year, prominent businessman living a parallel life for a decade. I went back home and became the perfect Simone again. Why wouldn't I? He'd been careless with arrogance, not suspicion. I cooked his favorite meals, waited up for him, kissed him, and gave him the intimate warmth he expected. I resurrected a honeymoon-era tenderness as camouflage. One evening, he mused aloud about the future. "I've been thinking about retirement," he said, dreamy. "Maybe in a few years we can travel. Italy, Greece, see the art you love." The art I had set aside for him flickered through my mind. I smiled, pouring his wine, my voice even. Inside, I was counting the days until his ruin. For 6 weeks I performed. I was incandescent, eager, attentive, affectionate. The Simone who once delighted him on their first dates, but now driven by a cool, calculated purpose. "You're radiant," he told me one morning, hugging me from behind. "What changed?" "I decided to appreciate what we have," I said, letting the bitterness hide beneath a domestic smile. Meanwhile, Jamal's investigators found the final piece. Elijah's consulting firm under his alternate name, Marcus Stanton, had secured government contracts using insider information funneled through his legitimate identity as Elijah Vance. The House of Cards had a foundation in corruption, as well as deceit. It was corporate fraud on an enormous scale. Amara had quietly seeded questions across social media, anonymous posts that hinted at a mysterious Marcus Stanton and his uncanny resemblance to Elijah Vance. Nothing direct at first, just enough to stir curiosity. Then the financial investigator hit the jackpot, a Cayman account holding $5 million. $5 million. Funds Elijah had siphoned away over years. Our money from my inheritance, from joint investments, all funneled into his escape plan or whatever future he had built for himself. Sterling's voice was flat when he said, "From the timeline, it looks like he chose to keep both lives. Maybe it was for the kids, maybe for the money, maybe simply because he could. 3 million here, 5 million there. The totals blurred into a monstrous sum that had been growing on lies. I fled to the bathroom and emptied my stomach until it was emptier than my trust. Sterling waited, patient and clinical. When I returned, he asked quietly, "What do you want to do with it?" "I need time to think," I told him. "Dig deeper. Every account, every investment. All of it." "Of course." "Divorce?" he ventured. "No," I said, colder than I expected. "I want justice." I spent 3 days in a hotel, telling Elijah I was visiting my sister in Chicago. In that anonymous room, with Sterling's folders spread like crime scene evidence across the bed, I made a decision. I would not be a broken woman who vanished quietly. I would not let him keep his life intact while mine was shredded. I would dismantle what he'd built, not in a single moment of rage, but with the precise cruelty of a surgeon. I called Jamal, my son, and a corporate lawyer. "Meet me at the Marriott, room 512, I said. He arrived an hour later, face pale. I laid everything out. His confusion morphed into disbelief, and then into a cold, dangerous fury that mirrored my own. "We'll destroy him," he said finally. "Bigamy, fraud, tax evasion, forged documents, it's all there." "I don't want him locked away," I told him. "I want him stripped of everything he values and forced to watch it burn." He looked at me like I had become formidable. "What's the plan?" We built one. Jamal sharpened the legal edges. Amara, who handled PR at a major firm, would control the narrative when the truth hit. She grieved, then she calmed and plotted. The headlines had to name him the villain, unequivocally. I recruited an unexpected ally in Patricia, Elijah's sister, who admitted she'd long suspected something. The trips, the slips. I thought it was an affair, not this, she confessed. She arranged access to the family safe deposit box. "Mom always loved you," she said. "You'll have what you need." Over the following weeks, the net tightened. A second investigator specialized in financial fraud uncovered a pattern of tax evasion and hidden income tied to Elijah's alternate identity. A forensic accountant traced transfers in shell companies. Jamal drafted asset-freezing motions timed to the second. Amara primed media contacts for a coordinated reveal. The story would hit with maximum force. A respected businessman exposed as a two-faced fraud. At home, I resumed my role as the devoted wife. Why wouldn't I? He'd been arrogant enough to become careless. I cooked his favorite meals, waited up no matter how late, offered passion with a smile that pleased him. One evening, he talked about retirement. Italy, Greece, museums, he said dreamily. The art I'd given up for him flickered through my mind. I poured his wine and listened, counting the precise days until his downfall. For 6 weeks, I performed like an actress at the peak of her craft. I was attentive, affectionate, glowing. The Simone from our early years, only now sharpened into a weapon. "You're radiant," he told me one morning, hugging me from behind. "What changed?" "I decided to value what we have," I replied, letting the bitterness hide behind a smile. And then Jamal delivered the final damning piece. Elijah's consulting business, run as Marcus Stanton, had secured government contracts using insider leverage available to Elijah Vance. The deception wasn't just personal, it was criminal and corrosive. The house of cards had a rotten foundation. Patricia had stationed herself near the exit, just in case Elijah decided to bolt. Dinner began with oysters, his least favorite dish, yet one he ordered anyway because they were mine. Another grand gesture of devotion for the audience to see. Conversation flowed alongside the French champagne, Dom Perignon, from the year of our wedding. A vintage so costly, Elijah had already bragged about it 3 separate times. "Elijah's always been the perfect husband," purred Brenda Jenkins, the wife of his senior partner, as she delicately cracked her lobster. "You're a lucky woman, Simone." "You have no idea," I replied, my smile smooth and practiced. Under the table, Elijah squeezed my hand. Others saw tenderness. I felt possession. At 9:30, as the Belgian chocolate desserts were served, he rose, tapping his glass gently with a knife. The quartet stopped playing. Conversations died. All eyes were on him. "Dear friends, family," he began, his voice warm, rich, the same tone that once made me fall in love. 40 years ago, in a small bookstore downtown, I met a woman who changed my life. Simone became my wife, my best friend, my confidant, my partner through every storm. A few women dabbed at tears. Brenda sighed dreamily. The men nodded in quiet admiration. It was a flawless performance. "These years haven't always been easy," Elijah continued, voice trembling with emotion. Real or rehearsed, I couldn't tell. "We've faced loss, doubt, and hardship. But Simone, my Simone, has always been my compass, the light that leads me home." The irony bit so sharply that I had to sip water to keep from choking. Every night he claimed to be guided home. He was driving somewhere else, to another house, another family. Then came the flourish, a blue velvet box from his pocket. "I want to renew my vows tonight," he declared, opening it to reveal a diamond eternity band that gleamed under the chandeliers. "Simone, will you do me the honor of remaining my wife for another 40 years? Applause erupted. "Bravo!" someone shouted. Phones flashed like paparazzi bulbs. It was perfect, the final act of his illusion. I stood slowly, letting him kiss me before the crowd's cheers, the ring cold and heavy on my finger. "My turn," I said, my voice cutting clean through the noise, clear as glass about to break. 40 years, I began, is a long time. Long enough to know every secret, every truth, every lie about someone. Or so one might think. Elijah smiled, hand still resting on my waist, blissfully unaware of the cliff opening beneath him. "I've prepared something very special for tonight," I continued, drawing my phone from my purse. Jamal had already synced the restaurant's projector and audio system to my device. A generous tip to the staff had secured this moment, a gift not only for my husband, but for every soul in this room. "Because a ruby anniversary," I smiled. Deserves clarity as flawless as crystal. I pressed play. Elijah's voice echoed through the speakers, unmistakable. Candace, my love, I'm heading home now. Yeah, I know Jalen's got his game at 8. Don't worry, I told Simone I'm away for a conference all weekend. She never suspects a thing. After all these years, she trusts me completely. It's almost pathetic how easy it is. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was catastrophic. His champagne glass slipped, shattering into glittering fragments across the marble floor. That's not, he stammered, his face draining from tan to gray. Oh, but wait, I cut in, my voice sharp as the broken glass at his feet. There's more. The projector came alive. Photos appeared. Elijah and Candace at a beach wedding. Him in a white linen suit I'd never seen. A birth certificate for Jalen Stanton listing Marcus Stanton as the father. Family Christmas photos spanning a decade. Elijah smiling beside a tree I never decorated. Sky's ultrasound, signed, to the best dad in the world. Love, Candace. Gasps rippled like waves through the room. Brenda Jenkins turned ashen, hand over her mouth. Devin Harris, Elijah's business partner, stared in frozen horror, no doubt calculating the fallout. Patricia wept quietly into her hands. 40 years, I said, circling Elijah, who stood motionless, hollowed out. 40 years with a bigamist, a liar, a criminal. Yes, friends, a criminal. Bigamy's a federal offense. Simone, please. Elijah finally choked, reaching toward me. Let's talk privately. Don't you dare. Jamal's voice cut like steel. He stepped between us. Don't even come near my mother. And before you think about running, the IRS already has your Cayman accounts, the $5 million you stashed away. The prosecutor has your forged contracts and fake IDs. You're finished. Amara picked up the abandoned microphone. To our guests, I'm sorry you had to witness this, she said, steady and cold. But after 40 years of public deception, it's only right that the truth is made public too. Our father didn't just betray our mother. He betrayed us all. This is madness, Elijah shouted, looking for allies. But everyone had backed away as if he carried a contagion. Devin, you know me. You know I wouldn't. Devin stood, expression carved from stone. Wouldn't what? Forge wills? Cheat your family? Apparently, I never knew you at all. I reached into my purse and drew out the final nail, the divorce papers Jamal had drafted. You have 2 choices, Elijah, I said evenly. Sign now, relinquish all claims to our assets, or face trial for bigamy, tax evasion, and forgery. Patricia rose, trembling but firm. You should also know, Elijah, I found Dad's real will. The one you forged is already with the authorities. Mom always knew you weren't right. It was the final blow. Elijah sank into a chair, the powerful man reduced to rubble. With shaking hands, he signed. His tears fell onto the pages, blurring his name, sealing his surrender. What followed was like falling dominoes, one collapse triggering the next. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the hotel balcony, watching city lights flicker while my phone buzzed relentlessly with calls I'd never answer. The red dress still clung to me like armor. The smeared makeup marked my battle scars. At dawn, Jamal arrived with coffee and his laptop. It's done, he said. The divorce is finalized. We froze the joint accounts at 7. He's out. His tone was ice. The sun had become the enforcer. At 7:30, Amara arrived with her PR team, 3 women armed with tablets and purpose. Within minutes, my suite became a command center. Press embargo lifts in 2 hours, she said. We've secured exclusives with 3 newspapers and 2 national stations. The hashtag's already trending. By noon, the entire country knew. At exactly 9 a.m., the story detonated across every screen. Prominent businessman living double life, bigamy, fraud, and 12 years of deception. Within minutes, the story of the bigamist of the year had become a global headline. The photos I'd provided, Elijah smiling with both families, ignited a social media storm. Images spread like wildfire. Cruel, ingenious memes sprung up overnight, merciless and mocking. My hotel phone trembled with calls. "Mrs. Vance, there are reporters in the lobby asking for a statement," the front desk said. Calm, measured, I replied, "Tell them my lawyer will address the press at 2 o'clock." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. By 11, Elijah's firm had released its own terse notice. Effective immediately, Elijah Vance was suspended from all duties pending an internal inquiry into serious ethical violations and potential corporate fraud. Devin Harris, his senior partner, was less circumspect on camera. "We are cooperating fully with the authorities. If the reports are accurate, Mr. Vance betrayed not just his family, but the trust of our partners, employees, and clients." At 3:47 p.m., my phone rang from an unknown number. Candace. Her voice shattered on the line, each word like a shard of glass. "Is it true?" she asked before I could speak. I answered simply, without venom but without consolation. "My name is Simone Vance. I'm his legal wife. I never died, Candace. He erased me from your life so he could build another. I'm sorry." She broke into a horrible, helpless sob. "The children," she managed. "My God, the children! Jalen worships his father. The baby. What do I tell them? How do I explain that everything they know is built on falsehoods?" There were no words that could stitch that wound. I said what I could. Children can heal. With honest love, with counseling, with time, they will recover. They are not to blame. "Did you know?" she whispered. "How long did you know?" 2 months, I replied quietly. 2 months of truth after 40 years of lies. Her next words were edged with panic. "I'll lose everything. The house is in his name. The accounts, it's all his. I have nothing. I quit when Jalen was born because he told me to." The cruelty cut through me. How expertly Elijah had kept Candace dependent. How thoroughly he'd constructed a life that left her vulnerable. I surprised myself by answering without hesitation. "Give me your details. My lawyer will be in touch. You are not culpable. We will make sure you and the children are protected financially." "Why help me?" she asked, bewildered. Because exposing him isn't the same as destroying 2 innocent children," I said. "They didn't ask to be born into a lie." The next morning, federal agents descended like a scourge. The IRS arrived at Elijah's office, at our home, and at the Blue House. Boxes of records were hauled away. Laptops, phones, hard drives, everything cataloged and seized. Even his prized watch collection was itemized and embargoed. What followed looked like a forensic excavation of a life built on deception, offshore accounts, shell companies, fabricated invoices, an elaborate web of tax evasion stretching back 15 years. It took a squad of forensic accountants weeks to begin to untangle it. Jamal ran the legal campaign with surgical calm and a ruthless edge. He leveraged the state's bigamy statutes, which automatically nullified any financial claims by a bigamous spouse, to strip Elijah of any legal right to our shared assets. The family home, a $2 million property, the 3 investment houses, the stock portfolio, they were transferred into my name alone. A week later, Jamal handed me a check, $3.7 million recovered from a Cayman account. "The rest," he said gently, "is buried in shell corporations. It may take years to reclaim, if we ever can." That afternoon, Patricia came to see me. The scandal had aged her overnight. She looked a decade older, her face mapped with shame and fatigue. "Mom always suspected something," she confessed, sinking heavily onto my hotel sofa. Before she died, she told me, "Look after Simone if the truth comes out." I think she knew somehow. "How is he?" I asked, hating the small, selfish pang of concern for a man who had destroyed us. "Destroyed," Patricia said bluntly. Candace threw him out. Hotels won't take his reservation anymore. He's on every channel, every feed. He's paying for a room at an extended stay off the highway in cash. Whatever hasn't been frozen. Friends are hanging up when he calls. He's a pariah, a man without refuge. 3 weeks after the revelation, I stood before a grand jury. The room was packed. Everyone leaned forward, hungry for the story straight from the source. I wore a plain black suit, no jewelry except my original wedding band, a relic of the woman I had been. For 4 hours, I related every detail, the lies, the discoveries, the evidence. Faces in the room registered shock, pity, disbelief. The prosecutor, young, razor-sharp Aaron Mitchell, probed meticulously. Mrs. Vance, over these 12 years, did you ever suspect infidelity? He asked. There were times, I admitted. Small inconsistencies, explanations that didn't sit right. But Elijah was a craftsman in deception. Every time the trail nearly revealed itself, he wove an alibi so convincing I felt ashamed for doubting him. And what made you finally confront the truth? He pressed. I paused, the memory raw and bright. Denial first, I said slowly. Then a pain that felt like it would split me in two. After that came a cold, deliberate anger, and finally a resolute determination. I would not let 40 years of lies dictate the rest of my life. The grand jury returned a unanimous indictment. Bigamy, tax fraud, document forgery, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Elijah faced decades behind bars. The formal charges listed potential sentences adding up to 20 years. A month later, he called from the county jail where he awaited trial. His voice was hollow, aged by shame. Why, Simone? Why didn't you let me explain in private? He pleaded. Explain what? I asked, incredulous. How you accidentally stumbled into another life for 12 years? How you mistakenly married a second woman and inadvertently fathered 2 more children? His protests faltered. The truth, transparent and terrible, had replaced the rehearsed lies he once offered so smoothly. I couldn't abandon her, he said, voice trembling. But you could abandon me every single day for 12 years? I asked quietly. You could vanish into another home, another life, and still call it love? I loved you, Simone. I always loved you. No, I replied, the clarity in my voice almost startling me. You loved the idea of me, the perfect wife that fit neatly into your carefully organized existence, but you never loved me, the woman with her own fire, her own flaws, her own dreams. You turned me into a supporting character in your grand performance, Elijah, a prop in the story of your double life. There was silence. Then his voice cracked, fragile and small. The children, my other kids, what will happen to them? Candace and I have already spoken, I told him. They will be provided for through the assets recovered. They'll never bear the cost of your crimes. They'll have what they need. You and Candace, talking? He asked, disbelief softening into something like shame. The victims of the same crime sometimes find solace in understanding each other, I said gently. Simone, please, he began, desperate, but I cut him off. No, Elijah, you don't get to want anything anymore. You had 40 years of my life. You will not have 1 second more. And then I hung up. That was the last time I would ever hear his voice. 2 years have passed since that disastrous anniversary dinner, the night everything came apart. This morning, I stood in my quiet kitchen, sunlight spilling over the rooftops of Atlanta as I poured my first cup of coffee. The apartment is mine. Every window, every tile, every choice. My phone buzzed, a news alert. Elijah had been released on good behavior, and I felt nothing. No rage, no fear, no nostalgia, just stillness. The man who once shared my bed now existed only as a ghost in someone else's story. The woman who loved him? she no longer existed either. Last month, my art exhibition opened. Portraits of an invented life. Each painting, a fragment of that long illusion. The blind wife, the awakening, the architect of her own freedom. Critics called it haunting, brave, cathartic. But for me, every brushstroke was therapy, every color a victory. At the opening, a man approached me. A retired literature professor, widowed, with gentle eyes and a laugh that felt like sunlight. "Your work moved me," he said softly. "There's so much pain in it, but so much hope, too." We had coffee the next day, then dinner. There were no expectations, no future plans, just two souls learning to live again. Life, I've discovered, begins anew at any age. Yesterday, Jamal called. "Dad tried to reach me," he said. "Does he want to reconcile?" I asked, already knowing the answer. I told him he had a family for 40 years, us, and he threw it away. He doesn't get to ask for another. My son, strong and unflinching. Amara, ever my mirror, had a simpler response. She blocked his number and said, "He's history, Mom." Patricia visits sometimes. She tells me Elijah now lives alone, a gray apartment, 1 bedroom, small kitchen. He works as a bookkeeper for a local firm that doesn't bother with background checks. Candace won't let him see the kids, not until they're old enough to decide. He lives quietly now, modest, invisible, maybe even honest, for the first time in his life. But this story isn't about Elijah. It never truly was. This story is about Simone, about me, about a woman who walked through the fire of betrayal and stepped out reborn. Yesterday, I found my old diary. Pages yellowed, ink faded, written by a girl who once dreamed of Paris, of painting under the Montmartre sky, of passion and freedom. I smiled. At 64, I am finally giving her that life. Next month, I fly to Paris alone. Just me, my brushes, and a suitcase light enough to dance with. It's not the scholarship I once gave up, but it's mine. My choice, my timing, my money, my freedom. I'll rent a small studio near the Seine. I'll paint until my hands ache. I'll drink cheap wine with artists who know nothing of my past, who see only the woman I've become. While packing, I found our wedding photo. Elijah and me, radiant, naive, untouched by time. I didn't tear it apart. I didn't burn it. I placed it gently in a box labeled fiction, because that's what it was. A beautiful, terrible fiction. My phone buzzed again. It was Michael. Yes, that's the professor's name now. The name no longer stings. "Ready for our tango class?" he asked. "Give me 10 minutes," I said, reaching for the red lipstick Elijah once called too bold for my age. Everything is bold now. Every shade, every step, every heartbeat. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back had lines etched by laughter and loss. Silver in her hair she no longer tries to hide. Eyes that have seen too much, yet still glimmer with hope. "Hello, Simone," I whispered to my reflection. "It's good to finally meet you." And then, the twist I never expected. While sorting through papers for my trip, I found a sealed envelope left by Agent Sterling, the investigator. "Open it when you're ready," he'd told me. Inside was a letter from my mother, her handwriting, delicate and steady. "My dearest Simone, if you're reading this, it means you've finally set yourself free. I always knew about Elijah. I followed him once and saw the other woman. But you were fragile then, grieving, dependent, and I feared the truth would shatter you. Forgive me for my silence. I was a coward. To make amends, I left an account only you can access. The key is hidden where we kept our treasures when you were little, beneath the old oak in our garden. Live, my love, live truly this time." I drove to that house, now owned by strangers who kindly let me search. Beneath the roots of that oak tree, I unearthed a small rusted box. Inside, documents for a Swiss account. Enough money to live 100 lives. My mother had given me freedom, even after death, Not just financial, but emotional. Proof that someone had always known and loved me enough to protect me until I could protect myself. I don't need the money, but I know what to do with it. A women's shelter, art scholarships, new beginnings for all the Simones still trapped in golden cages. And that's where my story ends, right where it should, with discovery, with truth, with liberation. Because this time, the truth didn't destroy me. It set me free. My name is Simone Vance. I am 64 years old, and I am finally, gloriously, free.